The only reason Wall Street survived is because the American people stepped in. And what I'm saying is, let's be honest with the American people. We have not addressed all the risks. The banks are stronger today than they were 8 years ago. They do have more capital. They do have better liquidity. But have we taken the risk of a financial crisis off the table? No, we haven't.
All right, that was Minneapolis Fed President Neel Kashkaris telling Maria Bartiromo, yeah, it could happen again. We still have too big to fail, and we got to break these puppies up, the big banks. Lenor Hawkins on that, on what she makes of all of this. You know, Lenor, you and I were talking. I was trying to get other cases here. If a Bernie Sanders praises those remarks, I don't know what that means, but it means that that's a populist pitch that many find intriguing.
Well, it's, you know, government knows best. I'm not really sure where the evidence is for that. The government knows best, and that government, having absolutely no consequences for their actions, is going to make the best decision, which we know that doesn't work that way.
Wasn't that Dodd-Frank? The best decision was that we don't have banks that are too big to fail, that if a big bank is on the brink, goodbye.
Yeah, that's what they tell us that they did. And he's right that we need to be honest with the American people. We need to be honest with what Dodd-Frank actually did. Dodd-Frank codifies too big to fail. It supports too big to fail. There's Article 204 says that the FDIC can purchase any debt obligation for a bank, which means you can bail out the creditors for banks. That's part of Dodd-Frank. If that isn't codifying too big to fail, I don't know what is.
That? Obviously, there was something intrinsic in bracing for the possibility. I always look at Dodd-Frank as a stupid insurance policy that's not going to be good. That we're going to have another meltdown in fast times. The stocks of these institutions just start free falling. There's their currency. There's everything about them. There's no controlling that. And Bank of America or Citigroup on the brink, we're not going to let them fall. We're just not going to let it happen.
Right, we're definitely not. You and I know that. Everyone knows that we're not going to let these banks fail. And
but I think Dodd-Frank is this fakery that's voiced on us to make us think that that won't happen and that we've demanded they build up their cash reserves. Well, cash reserves don't do squat in the middle of a meltdown.
No, and I'm more concerned with why we keep telling these banks they know they're not going to be allowed to fail. If I know I'm not ever going to fail, I can't fail, imagine the things I would do. It's like basically you're immortal. If you know you're immortal, you're not going to be careful. These banks aren't being careful with their shareholders.
That's very well put. If you know you're immortal.
They're immortal version of business.
But I tell you, looking at the pay packages of these guys, they're obviously feeling very comfortable enough to say, yeah, whatever. We'll pay the fines. We'll do what we have to do. But when push comes to shove, no one is going to shove us off into bankruptcy. And all the depositors and all those we've given loans to, right with them.
Because it's never their fault. Because we don't allow failure. And failure is how you learn.
Well, that's as much the government's fault.
Absolutely. The government's the one that creates it.
With auto companies, everything. We set a precedent here that was stupid. I said as much with President Bush. Dangerous precedent here.
Get really big and you're completely immortal. Get really big and the government will have your back. And that changes your behavior. And we don't have fear. I want these banks to be scared to death all the time of making the wrong decision. And I want shareholders to be scared. And I want people who put their money in banks into checking accounts to be scared. Nobody's scared. Being fearful is a good thing. It's how you are careful about what decisions you make. When you have no fear, there's no consequences.
There are a lot of people who have a lot of big assets at banks and institutions, and when I tell them, you know, there are these FDIC rules and limits, put them in 10 or 11 different institutions.
Spread it around.
Right?
Yeah. Well, you don't have to be responsible because that's what the government wants. The government wants us to not be responsible for our own decisions because we clearly can't make them. The government will make it for us, and we'll all be safe because that's worked so well so far.
Very good. You have very good insight into this. I appreciate that. The superhero stuff, too, is one thing I'd never examined. Thank you very, very much. As she was talking...
Green Lantern Bank.
There you go.